You can now get into multifamily investing with only 5% down. So in this video, we're going to tell you exactly how it works. And this significantly reduces the amount of cash you need to bring to the table, because previously, and this is Rich Conlon, he's a great local lender. We work together all the time. Previously, you had to bring 25% to the table if you wanted to buy a conventional 4-unit property.
Yes. So multi-family properties are obviously homes that have more than just a single unit for living. So we're talking 2, 3, and up to 4 units, right? Now, with those type of properties, there are some different financing aspects and requirements that must be met. Previously, the down payments would range, depending on how many units it was, 15 to upwards of 25%. So the news with Fannie and Freddie reducing it to 5% was massive.
That's insane. So yeah, so 15% was more for like a 2-unit, and then 25% was more for like a 4-unit. But some real numbers. So on a $750,000 house, previously at 25% down, you'd be bringing over $200,000 in cash to the table. Now the down payment would be like $37,000 according to my rough math. So it's making multifamily investing much more affordable to the average person. So if you're looking to scale your portfolio, this could be a great way to do it. And so how does it work? The requirements. So basically 2 to 4 unit property. It does have to be owner occupied for at least a year. And then you only have to put 5% down. You also do have to move into it within 60 days of closing. So it's kind of similar to most loans in that aspect.
Yeah, when it comes to the requirements, it's not as expensive as some may seem, or daunting, or too complicated, right? It definitely one of the units needs to be occupied as a primary residence, and then those other units you can actually use some of the projected rental income, which I'm sure we'll get into. But from a property, the appraisal process, everything is pretty much the same. It's just a matter of making sure that one unit is going to be occupied as a primary, and going to be occupied within the first 60 days.
And I've even seen some 4-unit properties where if the resident gives notice that they're leaving within 60 days of closing, sometimes that can work as well, right? So you can even look at fully occupied properties with the understanding that someone would have to give some type of notice that they're actually leaving the property.
Yeah, that's definitely correct. When it comes to current residents and using the rental income for those, that's something that, it's always a case by case. It's definitely more unique cases, right? When you have those units that others may be living in or unoccupied. So in terms of a qualification there, it goes down in terms of, hey, can you just qualify for it all together, all by yourself? If so, great. Then if we need the additional potential income from those properties, that's when we'll get into exactly how that will be.
And most lenders are going to take 75% of the gross rents to kind of help you qualify if you need it. Some people can just buy it just completely vacant, right. But sometimes you can afford much more property, a bigger property, if you have the rental income coming in.
Yes, that's correct. So in terms of how the rental income is calculated, the 75% is, again, based on the market, what is deemed to be the market average rent for units similar of that. So that goes into the appraisal report, right? And the appraiser is going to go through and they're going to look up what the average rent is for units of similar case. Mm-hmm. And so that figure is then set as the rental amount, if you will, and then 75% of that is then used as potential income that can be added.
And that's if there's already renters in there, though, the appraiser is going to go off of those numbers. So sometimes there's properties where the rent is like way under market, so it might be a little bit tougher to finance those, but just kind of depends person to person. All right, the maximum loan amount. So this is something that's going to change every year, and it's also probably going to depend on the jurisdiction. Like in San Francisco, like sometimes loan amounts are going to be higher because every property in San Francisco and the Washington D.C. area can be in the millions of dollars. So as of right now, for a 2-unit, the maximum is $930,000. For a 3-unit, it's about 1.125, and for a 4-unit, it's about 1.4 million. So you can buy some pretty valuable properties with only 5% down, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a huge, again, kind of goes back to the reduction to the down payment. And when you think about that with those price points that you just mentioned, that's pretty that's pretty noticeable, right? The key thing, with those obviously is the qualifying when you get up into those price points, and making sure from a payment perspective. So, I wouldn't say I've probably seen too many 4-unit, at that top end range.
Yeah.
But to say that it's there and it's possible is enough.
Yeah. And I actually just saw a property. It was it was probably around 1.4, but the cash flow, the gross income, if it was fully rented out, was almost like $10,000 per month. And it did have a commercial unit, so that might not even qualify. But some of these properties, you'd be surprised if they're like 2 or 3 bedrooms in a good area. Someone that might have not thought they could qualify for 1.4. All of a sudden, if the units are being rented out for like $3,000 per unit, you might be able to actually afford that $1.4 million property if it makes sense for you.
Yeah, it's definitely opened a lot of doors. So with the multi-unit properties, I always stress, let's get the info on the property, all that we can. Let's review it, make sure from a realtor's perspective, the access that you have to the MLS listing, all the details, and then the access to the listing agent. We've seen with multi-units, it's way more of a team effort from both sides to make sure that we have all the information and that we don't run into an unknown pitfall that we had information or access to, we just didn't really vet it out. So I would always just recommend, if you come across multi-unit, if you're in the market for that make sure that you have a reliable agent as yourself, and then communicating with the other side to get all the information so that the lender can vet out and make sure, because when you get into commercial space usage, that stuff that can run into some property eligibility issues that you want to make sure you have addressed up front.
Yeah, the property has to be 4 units or less for this to work. You can't go out and buy like a 20-unit property with 5% down. So let's compare this to the FHA program. So FHA is traditionally what people use, where it'd have to be owner occupied, 3.5% down. But the biggest difference is, I guess, is the 75% self-sufficiency test and then the PMI.
Yes. So comparing the Fannie 5% multifamily to the FHA multifamily, it's more hoops to jump through with FHA, quite simply. You drilled it with the self-sufficiency test. That's something that can prevent financing, whereas the conventional does not. Then you get to the payment, right? That's a big important factor. FHA, yes, the 3.5% down does seem appealing compared to the 5% down. You're saving 1.5% of capital in terms of the down payment. But the mortgage insurance on FHA is often higher. And then it's also not something like conventional loans. The PMI does eventually fall off of your payment when you reach a certain equity point. With FHA, that does not. It's for the life of the loan. So you're already setting yourself up to refinance if you want to get rid of the FHA PMI down the road. So you're setting yourself up for 2 transactions.
Yeah. And the 75% rule, it just basically says for 3 to 4 unit properties, 75% of the gross rental income has to at least cover the monthly mortgage amount. So I've run into that several times where it doesn't qualify for FHA based on that rule. So with this 5%, that we could probably get around that. The next one is, how many of these loans could you have? Could someone just buy with 5% and then after a year rent it out, buy another 4 unit, and pretty soon after 10 years have like 40 units and then just chill after that, right? That's your retirement.
Yes. So when we're talking about max max amount of finance properties that a buyer can have when purchasing. It used to be, it was a hard cutoff at 10, right? They've relaxed that. What it comes down to is making sure that you have sufficient reserves to cover the housing payments for all of the properties that you own. And so how that is, and the reason it kind of gets into is risk adverse, right? If something were to happen where your tenants for the majority of your properties or all your properties, let's say, just moved out, they were done and moving on, and you weren't able to replace somebody to cover that rent for a period of time, you still have to make your mortgage payments. So as a lender, we need to verify that you have anywhere from 2 to 6 months of payments covered in, it can be retirement, it can be brokerage, it can be stock, checking, savings, what have you, a combination of your assets to cover those payments in full for 2 to 6 months on each property, right? So the more properties that you obtain financing for, the bigger profile is great, but a lender's also has to make sure that you're going to be able to cover that via financial hardship.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then as far as the downside to these loans, just to play devil's advocate here. So obviously it's owner occupied. So you'd have to live at the property for a year. So you're living with your residents, which can be great. Or, if there's maintenance issues, they could knock on your door. You have to set some type of boundary or some type of system for maintenance, have a local handyman or something like that. And then the other downside is kind of like I mentioned, you can't buy a 20 unit property for 5% down. It has to only be 2 to 3 to 4 units. And sometimes a 2 unit might be a much better deal than a 4 unit. I was just looking with a buyer and we found a great 2 unit deal, whereas some of the 4 units were actually overpriced. So you kind of have to, like, generally speaking, I like bigger properties, but you just kind of have to, like, I have a couple small multifamilies. You have to just look and compare it to what else is on the market that's the same size.
Yeah, no, that's definitely in more of, an arena that I haven't gotten into. I myself do not own any multi-family properties yet. That's something that I would consider, but when considering the aspects of you're living with your tenants, that is something certainly to think heavily on. But I think this change is definitely going to be a beneficial impact for many homeowners and in generating and creating a healthy real estate, financial profile.
Yeah. And like, I actually wrote this down. A lot of industry experts, what they've said about this, it's basically stimulating the real estate market because now there's a much larger pool of buyers for these multifamily deals. Whereas previously you had to bring 200K, let's just as an example, to the table. Now you might only have to bring 37K. So there's going to probably see more movement in the multifamily space and more buyers and, hopefully eventually higher prices as well. Next up, how to get started with this. So if you're looking to buy a 2 to 4 unit, 5% conventional owner occupied, reach out to me below. My contact information is there. We can get you pre-approved with Rich. I'm in the Washington, D.C. market, so D.C., Virginia, Maryland, but I can definitely put you in touch with other agents nationwide if you're looking somewhere else. Would love to assist you.